So a quick reminder before we get started, you can download today's presentations as PDF in the download pod that you see on the screen. You can also get to know more about the National Operations Center of Excellence resources through the no-code useful links box that you see below the download pod. And then we have about 7 specific links related to talking team resources and things we wanted you to check out there as well. So please make sure to take advantage of those files and links. This screen will be available now, and then again at the end during the Q&A session. So a few other logistics that I wanted to mention. We are recording this webinar, and that recording along with the presentation will also be available on the on-demand learning section of the NOCO website. All attendee phones are on listen-only mode by default, but please stay engaged by using the question discussion pod to type in any comments or any questions that come to your mind during the presentations. We have dedicated time at the end to do a Q&A session where our moderator will be reading your questions out loud and will point them to the presenters. So with that, I'll hand it over to our moderators today, Paul, Jordan, and then later on, Joe will continue and help Paul. But for now, Paul.
It's more like Paul will be helping Joe, but anyways, thanks, Nilo, and again, thanks to the Center of Excellence for always partnering with us, and you in particular, Nilu, who are so awesome, just really are awesome. Remind me to tell your boss that as well, because really appreciate all the work you do. So welcome everybody, and we have a nice lineup of speakers today, cool people, just as we've done in the past. But I just wanted to mention for a second that this is an area that Jim and I have been interested in for a long time, even though we're primarily city boys, although Jim is not so much now. But, we have never been able to get the funding to do, to focus on rural TEM. And we've heard loud and clear from various folks around the country that we need to focus more in this area. So this is in response to our interest, but also the interest of folks who have heard around the country. And, my eyes are opened every time I do hear and learn more and more about the rural aspects and the rural challenges, that folks have when it comes to emergency response and crashes in particular. So today we're going to talk about, we're going to have Joe Tebow, who is a partner with Jim and I at the Federal Highway Administration TIM program, and Martha Eddy will kind of give you an overview of the research project that we have underway. Jamie Sullivan is also on that contractor team, but she you can see her title there, but she has several other titles, and basically is an expertise in rural transportation. And then, we're going to go on to rural response for involving livestock, which is something that here in Boston I never think about, but it's a big problem throughout the country. And Iowa and Megan. Patent-Nygren is going to talk to us about the Nebraska program, but certainly not least, Sheriff Ron Spike is going to talk about how they manage incidents in the rural setting with agricultural equipment, horse and drawn carriages, and more with the rural challenges. So very cool agenda. We've been wanting to do this for quite some time. First, I want to explain a couple of high-level overviews, and then you'll be done with me for the day. For those of you that might be involved with the safety service patrols in your state, we are organizing a pool fund study. Basically, it's research money, the federal research money that just gets reallocated at the request of the state. So if you're interested, or your state or your Safety Service Patrol, may be interested, you need to reach out to your research section at the DOT, and they know how to do this. They know where to go, although I'll give you a little bit more information. And this is done at the request of the some folks within the community that manage Safety Service Patrols, and thought, that they had a little ad hoc group going, and thought we could more formalize it by talking about, by getting together and establishing some basically standard best practices and some, standard and, basically recognizing some standards and share best practices and things like that. So, as I said, I think we have 4 or 5 states signed up now. It's relatively cheap when you talk to DOT research money. $25,000 is the ask per state. So you would just go to this website, poolfundstudy.org, and click on the solicitation tab for more information. But your research office would know how to do that. Just a reminder that the TIM self-assessment season is underway. What's going on here? TIM self-assessment season is underway, and it goes up through November 21st. And just a reminder that this year we have a rural and emerging version of the self-assessment. So we took out some questions, basically just took out some questions that we're rural and some emerging areas just not going to be able to make progress in. So why even get involved with questions that you can't have an impact on? So we are underway with the planning for a crash response safety week, responder safety week, and I have a webinar October 5th at 3 p.m. Again, that's listed at the on the NOCO website, and then another call, all states planning call on October 13th at 3 p.m. Jim may talk a little bit more about this. Jim is actually our team lead for CRSW, and but there's more and more resources becoming available. We've had a stronger contractor support with this program this year, and we're very anxious. And by the way, that Crash Responder Awareness Week that you may not be aware, not Awareness Week, Safety Week, that you may not be aware of is second week of November annually. So there's some recommended social media toolkit that's on there, and I won't read that whole thing to you, but basically we're going to have recommended themes for each day during that second week in November, and you can see some of the topics there. But more to come on that. Participate in the webinars that are coming up. Next month we're going to go to large trucks and some autonomous some autonomous truck pilot programs that are going on, much to our chagrin, I guess. But there's also Colorado has an autonomous truck-mounted attenuator that they're testing, and they're going to talk a little bit about that. And then back to a little bit of rural focus, where there's many of you are familiar with towing and recovery incentive programs, but actually Florida has had towing incentive program for basically they're for large wrecks, for those of you who are not familiar. But Florida has had them for a number of years throughout the state, but now a relatively new program is a rural focused towing and recovery incentive program. So with that, I will pass it on to my partner in crime, Mr. Jim Ostrich.
Thanks, Paul, and welcome again, everyone. Great to see the number climbing there. We're up to 169. Hope everyone's doing well. have to start out with this slide. You guys know sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But very sad, but super important to note that we're at 46, which was the total number for last year. You can see the breakdown right there. And we have 3 months left in the year, ladies and gentlemen. So just keep doing what you're doing. I'm going to highlight, I'm going to go through the training slides real quick, but I want to stay on one particular one because really the training, the TIM training can make a big difference, a huge impact to these line of duty deaths, responders struck by vehicle deaths. And if you don't believe that, then you're not on the right team. I hate to say it, but yeah, there's a lot of other factors too, the ones we can't control, such as the impairment of drivers, distraction, drugs, drunkenness, drowsiness, and disabled and just plain dangerous drivers, as we say in the training, for sure. I don't know what the answer is. I really don't. The fact that these types of incidents continue is just horrendous. We had one in Florida just earlier this morning or late yesterday at an intersection, and the driver actually ended up dying in the hospital. But the lieutenant, I believe it was a fire lieutenant, was struck and is in critical condition. And that goes to the situation of the injuries, which hopefully, as you've heard Paul, Joe, myself say, we'll get to the bottom of that and have a better understanding what the injury numbers are. So anyway, keep that in mind and keep their families and everyone in your thoughts and prayers. Thank you. So as of the 13th, we're almost at 549,000 responders trained nationwide. It's a big deal, folks, and we have a long way to go, as I always say, and you know, but I'll focus on those two new slides here in a minute to make my point. And don't anybody get mad at me, okay? Because I'm just shooting from the hip here and speaking from the heart. Don't normally show this slide, but just the train-the-trainer sessions that have occurred since the beginning of the program, almost 10 years ago now, June of 2012. And there's still states that are out there planning and conducting their own state-led train the trainers. And Paul, Joe, and I, we encourage you. We highly encourage you to keep doing this. And we'll support you with materials and thumb drives as best we can. And yes, the curriculum is being updated, but I will say that those 4 national virtual train-the-trainer sessions that we held back in June, July, they were very successful, I dare say. And there was a total of 98 trainers that were trained, all 4 of those train-the-trainer combined from 26 states. And a number of states took advantage of this for sure, and I want to give a big shout out to Utah, Florida, and Nevada trainers that attended, 7 that actually took it to heart and right away started doing training shortly thereafter their graduation. And so kudos to Utah, Florida, and Nevada. Continuing on here. Let me get this out of the way. Okay. So here's the numbers of trainers, 23%. Sad story, as you've heard me say, 23%, right, of this top banner, 23% of 13,210 trainers that have graduated, and just 23% is what's gotten us to this 549,000. And I think we're all family here, and we should all know that we can do better, and we should do better. And all I'm saying is, from this point forward, you need to push. We all need to push and get these numbers up. Enough is enough. And I understand pandemic. We're in it with you. We know, but there's lots of resources out there as far as online training through the Responder Safety Learning Network and National Highway Institute. And I know there's states that are ramping up their in-person training. So anyway, this is the map, the national map, with both the in-person number and the web-based training number below in parentheses. This is the total. By the way, I'll point something out here to you that, let me go with this slide. This is a new slide. I purposely asked Katie Belmore, our contractor, to develop a slide that shows the progress from one report to the other. If you look in the second column, which was, or I should say, the first column is the report as of today versus the report as of the 30th of August. But you can see right there the top 10, if you will. Those are the states that are actually training. I wanted you to see that's fantastic, those top 10 states. But then as you see that color line fading down and down to the table on the right, and you see the numbers in the last column, progress since last report. And I'm sorry, that's just not acceptable. That's not acceptable, ladies and gentlemen. And I love you to death. Paul, Joe, and I, we love you to death, but we can do better than this. And it's important for all of us, for all our families, for our responders, our veterans that have served our nation and now are responders, and just to make sure everybody goes home. This map here, I wanted to point out that you see Georgia now has reached their total population of responders to be trained. They're the first state. They're actually over 100% down here just above Florida. That's a big deal. And many of you are over this goal of 45%. But please keep doing everything you can through your committees, through your sphere of influence, as we always say, to keep this training going. Here's the bar chart. And I took the liberty of showing, I guess I must have took it out, huh? Oh, shoot. Oh, well. My bad. I had a shot of just the table here of the top 10 states that I wanted to focus on, but you can see it here, and I already spoke to the slide. So with that, Paul, or no, I'm going to turn it back. I'm going to turn it over to Joe now, right? Joe Tebow?
Yeah. If I could, Joe, if I could just jump in for 1 second. I recognize that we may have some new folks that aren't familiar with the training on, because we sent a distribution out to some rural committees and some rural groups, distribution groups. So if every state is active in the training, so if you need more information, just reach out to Jim and he'll get it for you. Sorry about that, but Joe, all yours.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Jim. Welcome, everyone. First of all, I echo Paul's earlier comments, thanking everyone for their assistance, the folks at NOCO. This is a great deal. You know, when I first stepped into this, and I have over 4 decades, you know, with volunteer fire service here in Maryland. But to draw that picture for you, if you pull out the front bay of our firehouse and make a left-hand turn, within 30 seconds you're in Southwest Baltimore City. So, you know, rural issues really wasn't in my wheelhouse. But, you know, then I had to unpack that a little bit in my head, because I-95, I-70, a lot of these, you know, huge interstates run right through our backyard. So, you know, when we're talking rural issues, you know, some of the topics we'll talk about a little bit later, yes, certainly can apply to us. Certainly not as frequently, but, you know, I started looking at this a whole different way. So when we started looking at the rural and remote challenges out there, you know, we recognized that we needed some subject matter experts in there, and we pulled together a panel, and Martha, Eddie will talk about that just a little bit later. But some of the things that, you know, that I heard, you know, just had me sitting with a pen in my hand and taking notes and thinking, gee, you know, how would I deal with that, right, in my world? And we're talking about areas of the country, many of you on the line here, right, where you have no highways, no expressways. It's all rural. It's 2 lanes, no shoulders to speak of on the road. You know, one of our experts said, you know, our primary response to crashes is single vehicle rollovers. You know, with a 2-lane road and no shoulder, and most often it's not just no shoulder, but a 2-foot to 6-foot drop off to the side of the road. And if you shut down, even though the vehicle's off the road, your responding apparatus is going to be on the road. So you still have to deal with traffic incident management in that rural environment. And in many of those areas, shutting down the road or stopping that traffic there, you know, becomes an incredibly huge deal, as many of you know, because detour routes might take you know, hundreds of miles or more, you know, around routes. So, you know, we looked at the long response times. You know, if any of you folks out there, and I'm sure you are, you know, that have the luxury of a, you know, 3 to 6 to 10 minute response time. Well, we're talking about jurisdictions that have a 30-minute, a 45-minute, an hour response time. So dealing with, and I'll stop just for a second, folks. If you're not on mute, please mute your phone. So a lot of the things they deal with, you know, the animals, the unique vehicles, communication issues. So we started unpacking all this and started looking at those challenges. And I see this as a approach that's going to lead us down the road to other things. And that is that we know that the national program is, you know, designed, built, and intended to be scalable, right? To be able to make it big and make it small security events. But we also recognize these very special challenges. So as we move along, you know, TIP for rural is going to mature over time. A great deal of the research that we've done and the fact-finding mission that we were on, you know, was supplemented by, you know, boots on the ground folks out there in many of our rural and remote areas. So that research, you know, we're packaging that back together again. With that said, you know, there are many things out there that came to light that I thought, oh yeah, I'd love to do that. Yeah, let's do that. Let's include that. And keep in mind that, you know, this is a project, and a project has a defined scope and a defined budget. So that's why I say, as rural TIM begins to mature, or as we learn more about it, you know, we'll expand it and we'll modify it as need be. I want to remind you folks that the chat pod, if you have questions, please don't wait to the end. You know, go ahead and pop them in the chat pod. We've got folks monitoring the chat pod. We can maybe give you an answer right away. So I wanted to get that out there. So use the chat pod. We got folks watching it right now as I speak. So as this project came together, we decided we were going to come together with a module or a supplement to the national training program, and that's exactly where we're going. We're about halfway into this project now, maybe a little bit over halfway, of a 2-year project. So we're going to start to produce this TIM Tech training module, if you would, for rural TIM. It's a segment, right, tailored use for rural communities. It'll be online and instructor live trainings where, you're taking the class, you're a rural area, you can pull that module out and, apply it to your environment. So as I said earlier, we don't have, in my world here in southwest Baltimore County, we don't have farms, but we do have, butchers and processing plants and interstates. And, so yeah, we could be exposed to some of the things that the rural community is exposed to kind of on a regular basis. So I'm going to give you more about what this project's done, and the road that we've taken. And in order to do that, I'm going to bring on, one of our guest speakers here, Martha Moorcock-Eddy. She is, with our consultant firm, Patel. She's Patel's Transportation Operations and Policy Program Manager. She has a BS degree in Industrial Systems Engineering. She has over 30 years experience in transportation and advanced transportation technologies. She's also the project manager for Patel on this TIM for Rural Environment project. And she's going to give us a little deeper overview, if you would, of the Rural TIM project. So with all that said, Martha, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready, Joe. Thanks.
Right,
and thank you, Paul, and thank you, Paul, Jim, and NOCO. And thank you all on behalf of the Patel team, which consists of Montana State University's Western Transportation Institute, HNTB, Enforcement Engineering, and JCS Tech Services. We're really happy to have been selected by FHWA for this 2-year TIM for Rural Environment project work, which brings together knowledge from the Rural TIM Responder Training Program, responder safety, and rural transportation towards the goal of identifying good practices for TIM in rural environments. The objectives are up here on the screen, and they're to conduct research on unique challenges and good practices. And I wanted to highlight just a little bit about our literature search. So obviously we did a literature search, but we also reached into those 3 communities shown on the right to more fully understand the challenges and practices in rural communities. So the results of the fact-finding effort were captured in a State of the Practice report, and that report is also the basis for our Rural TIM training framework and learning objectives. Ultimately, this is going to lead to marketing and outreach channels for knowledge transfer of rural TIM good practices. Let me switch slides. So putting the rural environment in context, Joe mentioned a little bit about how it might have been difficult to put it in context. So I wanted to point out that according to the Bureau of Transportation Statistics, there are nearly double the amount of rural roadway lane miles in the United States versus those in urban areas. So there's double the lane miles in rural areas, but only 19% of the U.S. population lives in the rural areas. This rural population accounts for about 30% of the miles traveled and for nearly half or 48% of all traffic fatalities. Also, the number of crashes in rural environments account for twice the fatality rate than in urban. So as everybody on this call knows, TIM programs reduce the duration and impact of incidents and improve safety for motorists, crash victims, and incident responders. Applying TIM to rural environments is key to saving lives and returning roadways to its normal traffic flow after crashes. So, as Paul pointed out at the very beginning, a clear opportunity is being addressed with this project, and one that's been a long time coming. So the opportunity is to improve roadside safety and movement of vehicles on rural roadways impacted by rural incidents. But there are some challenges and unique characteristics in rural areas, such as those working in rural areas have to navigate large geographic coverage areas, which typically results in longer response times. In addition, response to roadway incidents is further complicated by having fewer resources. Challenges for incident responders include unique incident characteristics, challenging roadway geometry, varying terrains or grades, shorter than desired sight distances, and oftentimes severe weather. These complicating factors on rural roads impact both the incident responders and incident clearance times. Fewer alternate routes and significant distances for traffic that has been rerouted are also rural environment challenges as are some gaps in telecommunications and radio coverage, which may impact incident notification and response. Also, there may be unique characteristics to crashes in rural areas, such as crashes involving livestock, horse and buggies, and wildfires or smoke conditions, which you're going to hear about some of these a little later on. Excuse me. You heard Joe talk about our expert panel. So in order for the project team to include boots on the ground rural TIM information, we included involvement from an expert panel of subject matter experts. I noticed when everybody was signing in the chat box that a few of them were on this call. So the project outcomes are thanks to input from the FHWA TIM program team and from the rural expert panel members. The expert panel subject matter experts included the community, rural TIM community and practitioners from fire, law enforcement, rescue, departments of transportation, local training and assistance programs, towing providers, and more. So we owe a huge thank you to all the expert panel members for their time, input, and guidance. The project team has leveraged your input through regular meetings and your review of work in progress items. So coming up in the very near future, the expert panel members are going to participate in the rural TIM pilot lesson as we continue to move forward with this project. So for my last slide, and before turning it back to Joe, this slide identifies the activities that are taking place through this project. Outcomes include a state of the practice report, rural TIM training lesson that we've talked about a couple of times. It is a supplement to the National TIM Responder Training Program, a pilot of this training, and some supplemental materials that are going to support rural TIM good practices. With that, I'm going to hand it back to Joe.
Outstanding, Martha. I greatly appreciate that and all the work that you're doing. At this time, you talk a little bit about the environmental scan and state of the practice study. That report is out almost in the final stages, and we're right now building the pilot program, if you would, to roll that out. With all that said, our speaker is James Sullivan. James is a senior researcher at Montana State University. She has a portfolio focused on rural advanced transportation technologies, traveler information, public lands, emerging safety topics such as local road safety, Vision Zero strategy, safe system approach, and traffic safety culture. James is a registered engineer in the state of Montana, and she currently serves as the director of the National Center for Rural Road Safety, manager of the Public Lands Transportation Fellows Program, and chair of the recently formed Rural Transportation Issues Coordinating Council for the TRB. With that said, Jamie, I'm going to turn it over to you, and thanks for your time. I greatly appreciate it.
Amy, you may be on mute.
Yeah, Jamie, you there?
She was having some connection problems earlier, wasn't she? She got dropped off earlier by the system.
I think I saw her reconnect at least once. Well, I tell you what I'll do. Her slide's up, although I don't know if it's totally loaded. I don't believe I'm seeing the entire slide. Yeah.
To troubleshoot, Jamie, if you can hear me, please hang up and call back again. And then I can unmute you. And then I guess the other choice we have is skip to Megan and then come back to Jamie.
Yeah, that's certainly an option, Megan, if you're there.
I'm ready.
Okay, stand by. We do have with us Megan Patent-Nygren is the training program coordinator at Nebraska LTAP, focusing on roadway safety. She's been with LTAP since 2014. A lifelong Nebraskan, farmer and livestock producer, the Livestock Emergency Response Program brings together professional and personal interests. Megan holds a degree in agricultural education and community and regional planning. And I'll share with the attendees that when we invited Megan in to give us just our committee talk, we were so impressed by all the actions that are taking place out there that we knew we had to reach out to her and bring her in so that we could share some of that information with the rest of the community. So thank you, Megan. It's all yours.
Well, thank you. I wanted to keep my bio short, and I omitted that I am a TIM trainer and a master trainer here in Nebraska. So I've been involved with the TIM project here as long as I've been with LTAP. So the TIM piece of our language was really new, and that's professionally how I ended up on this team. So in Nebraska, we have a livestock emergency response plan training that is an initiative that is co-sponsored by University of Nebraska Extension and the Nebraska Department of Agriculture. Our committee, I'm the transportation person on our committee. We also have our beef quality assurance specialist. We have an animal welfare, animal science faculty member, our extension emergency response statewide educator, someone from our office that oversees institutional animal care and health for our campus, and the emergency manager from the Department of Ag. So we all come from various disciplines, but together to help our responders learn how to address incidents on the roadways that involve livestock. So the goal of our training really is twofold. So the first piece is that we want our emergency response agencies, usually coordinated by the emergency manager for the county, to have a plan in place so that they have some protocol for their participating agencies to follow if there's an incident regarding livestock. One of the things that you need if you have, for example, cattle involved in a crash is knowing where some of those extra resources that you don't normally call to a scene are and are accessible to you before you have the crash. The training is also two-part in that a lot of our responders don't have a lot of experience with livestock. Even in a rural state where the vast majority of our land area falls under that rural definition, we have a lot of responders who have never seen a cow face-to-face or never held a chicken or any of those kinds of things. And so we include some hands-on training for those responders to at least have some comfort in some animal behavior background before they're on scene of a crash. I will point out that this is really a rural-focused project, but the very first agency to sign up for our first training was the Omaha Police Department because, as was mentioned, livestock travel through Baltimore even if that's not where they live. So here in Nebraska, of course, we have more cows than people, but we also have a world-class zoo. So the same principles are going to apply whether you have a tiger headed to the Denver Zoo or whether you have a truckload of turkeys. We have six modules that are part of our day. Some of these are going to overlap with that typical 4-hour TIM training, particularly that response plan and ICS unit at the beginning and arrival and scene assessment. We use those same TIM principles, so we're not confusing, we're not teaching something different. We want our responders to follow those same procedures, just know that there might be some extra things to do when livestock is involved. This module 4 is where we're going to spend about 70% of our training day. Biosecurity is a major issue We've all learned more about how illnesses spread in a population in the last year and a half than any of us, I think, thought we wanted to. The same issues occur when we have livestock involved. It's a major economic impact if we have a disease that, you know, affects all of the cattle in our state. And so we're very particular about biosecurity. Insurance is involved. We have some very expensive property. Recently, there was an exposition in the middle of the state that included a bull that lives in the eastern part of the state that sold at auction for $3.5 million a couple years ago. So you don't want to have to be the one who has to decide to euthanize that particular animal. So we do talk about all of those different steps, and I'm going to go through a few example slides of things that are part of the training. So we start out with some data. We know that 2017, which is the most current year we have, actually I have the 2019 data. I haven't updated the slide yet. But in 2017, we had approximately 2,500 crashes in Nebraska that involved an animal. This could have been wildlife like a deer, or it could have been a livestock animal. 216 injuries were a result of those crashes. And we have not had a lot of human fatalities. We average about 1.3 a year over the last 15 years, so we're fortunate in that regard. Economically, it's significant, though. And so whenever we talk about livestock, again, we raise livestock as an economic enterprise. We have to look at the effect that those crashes have economically. Just like when we look at how traffic backed up on the interstate system in Omaha impacts our economy, so do livestock transportation incidents. We use, just like in the TIM training, we use a lot of examples of real-life incidents that have occurred. What worked, what didn't work, how would you do things differently, some of those after-action type conversations regarding those incidents. Now that we've had about 3 years of trainings in this, we now have responders from all over the state that send us photos and stories and information. So we get some of the behind the scenes, not just what makes the newspaper, but the responder perspective that we've been able to start to incorporate into trainings as well. So the training piece is really just one part of the program because, again, we want the plan. So we remind them that we're doing training, but you have homework when you leave. And then within a couple of months, we want that plan back. And then we offer as a carrot additional follow-up training related to some specific topics that might be more of a target in their area. In the part of the state I live in, we recently had our first commercial scale large poultry processing plant built in more than 40 years. And so we have a lot of new poultry production, and everyone is scared of what to do if they have a chicken truck involved in a crash. So I've been doing a lot of follow-up poultry-related training in our area as a way to help reassure those responders that they're ready in case that occurs. Throughout the training, we have this case study that we follow, so we dispatch little bits of information, and we have the responders work in roundtables to analyze the information that they have available, apply their training and their protocols to that so they can identify what those next steps are. And then when we go into that next module where we actually talk about those next steps, we'll find that a lot of them, their instincts are on the right track, and so we can start to reaffirm that they're really ready for this. I mentioned that we have some overlap, so arrival and scene assessment is going to start with some of those same types of things that we're accustomed to, but we're going to add some pieces. This page right here is an appendix in the handbook that they all receive. Is probably the most important piece of paper that the participants will get and use out of this training. So it's a checklist of things related to that particular incident. It also has a resource list, so we know which veterinarian we can call at 2 o'clock in the morning when we have a hog truck on its side in the middle of an intersection. Or we know where in our county we can access portable fencing on a trailer ready to come to assist us. We know where to take animals that survived the crash, but we don't have a truck to put them on to take to their actual destination. So we know where those holding spaces are. We know where extra animal moving equipment is, some of those types of contacts and resources. We talk a lot about public perception. When we have an incident that involves livestock or any animals, we know that different people are going to respond to animals in different ways. A lot of people are accustomed to having pets like cats and dogs that we apply a lot of human characteristics to, okay? My dog doesn't need clothes, but my kids think it's fun to give them clothes, and that humanizes them. So we're accustomed to that with animals. So when we have an incident where we have injured animals, we might have animal fatalities, and we're in a public space on the public roadway, we need to be aware of how our actions look to the looky-loos, the passerbys, and today we're going to see that on social media. So we have a couple of different case studies that we talk about, or examples we talk about related to that. But similar to when we have human fatalities, what kind of screening can we do? What do we need to do to keep people off the scene, to keep that event contained, and not have the public questioning responders who are following industry-safe recommended practices to handle those animals as humanely as possible, according to the most current research in animal handling. We talk about some basics. What is this animal? So not all bovine animals are cows. The animal on the left is a beef cow. Cows are female bovines. The animals on the right are yearling calves, and most of these happen to be boys. So we're not going to call them cows. We're going to call them steers because that's what they actually are. So we go through some of the major livestock species and talk about some of the distinguishing characteristics. We also talk about some of the things to keep in mind because not all animals are the same. Most of our livestock food animals are herd animals, so they are going to want to stay in a group, and that's going to affect how we can move them, how we can maneuver them, how we can separate them into groups. We're going to talk about blind spots. We're going to talk about their defense mechanisms, their flight or fright animals, with some of those different species. For example, these are dairy cattle, so they're going to look a little bit different than those beef cattle that we saw earlier. Dairy cattle tend to be a little bit thinner. They don't carry as much finish. They're genetically selected for this. They're bred for this because we want all of their resources to go into milk production. They're perfectly healthy. They just have a different body type than that animal that we're breeding to give us nice juicy steaks. We talk about some different vehicles. So a trailer that's hauled behind a pickup is going to be different than a semi-truck. We'll talk about capacity, how many animals. You know, if you hear over your dispatch system that you have a potload of cattle, how many cattle is that versus a horse trailer, et cetera. Some characteristics, for example, semi-truck trailers that have animals in them tend to fall over on their left side. So how that works with the gates and the floors and the dividers inside, getting livestock out is not going to make your typical door accessible. Here's one of the diagrams we use when we talk about animal comfort zones, flight zones, blind spots, those kinds of things. Here are some photos from the hands-on training component. So here we have some firefighters at our Nebraska Fire School working with some goats. One of my co-trainers, Jesse Fulton, is kind of talking about them and demonstrating some things with goats, and then in the next sequence of the training, we actually let the responders in the pens and give them some instructions to let them practice what to do. Typically in our trainings, we'll have cattle, hogs, goats, and or sheep. They're pretty similar, so we don't always need both. And then, of course, chickens to practice with. And we'll do those in smaller groups in kind of a round-robin breakout session format. If at all possible, we like to have a semi-trailer that has been involved in a crash on site. That's all dependent on finding a local salvage yard or tow truck company that has one available that they can lend us for the day. Depending on what condition that truck is in, this is always a little bit, we'll do the best we can, and we have to be a little bit flexible. We can do extrication exercises and allow the first responders to use their tools to cut away more parts of the trailer. This particular training, the trailer we got was pretty much decimated, but we can see where those points of strength are, where the support structure is, and where the best recommended places are to open up the truck. One of the things that we sometimes see, for example, is they'll cut open the truck and fold the lid or the roof down on the ground like you might open your oven door. But cattle don't want to walk on that, so you need to open it up more like a set of French doors instead of like an oven. And so some of those best practices are things that we talk about and demonstrate. I have a little bit of time for some questions. One of the pieces that I don't have all the information I wanted for today is that we didn't come up with this on our own in Nebraska. About 5 years ago, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, through the National Beef Quality Assurance Program, funded a project specific to beef. And North Dakota State University was the lead land-grant institution on that. And they have done some train-the-trainer programs throughout the United States. We started with one of those. When we brought the project to Nebraska, our dean said, well, beef are really important. They are our #1 livestock enterprise in Nebraska, but we need you to make this project to cover all livestock species. We don't want to discriminate specifically towards beef and against anything else. So our version is the topics are similar. Our version is a little bit different because, again, we want to address all potential animals that might be on a scene. So one of the things I wanted to have was that list of states that have had the train the trainer to be able to refer you to your local land-grant university. If you want follow-up information, reach out to me and I can connect you with the person in your state that is likely going to know who the best contacts are there if you're looking for some local collaboration.
Outstanding, Megan.
Thanks.
Hey, thank you. Hey, if you would you be so kind to maybe in the chat pop your email address in there in case anyone wants to reach out to you?
Absolutely.
Outstanding. Okay, I'm going to back up just a little bit. Jamie's back with us again. Jamie, I'm not sure if you were here when I did your bio, but I did such an amazing job with it that I'm just going to go ahead and let you jump right into your presentation. So with no further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Jamie Sullivan. Thank you. Jamie, or you might be on mute, maybe? Or maybe we lost you.
Joe, I think this is highlighting one of the problems we discovered, right? If I'm not mistaken, Jamie is out in rural Montana. And one of the things that we discovered was, I discovered it. It's been well known to people in rural America, but the connectivity problem in the the problems with cell phones and Wi-Fi and everything else.
Yeah, I had just reached out to her to see if she was ready to go, and she said yeah. So in that short time period, we might have lost her. But hey, Sheriff Spike, are you out there?
Yes, Joe, I am.
Yeah, would you mind pinch hitting for us?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Give me just a second there. I want to give you the proper intro here, and as time goes on, we're all having our challenges here. But ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is going to be Sheriff Ron Spike. Sheriff Spike has been in law enforcement for 50 years, and the last 30 years as the elected sheriff of Yates County, New York, operating a full-service agency with county police, corrections, and 911 dispatch. He's the chairman of New York State Municipal Police Training Council. He's on the executive board of the National Sheriff's Association and is a frequent instructor for sheriffs and other officials in New York State on contemporary public safety administration topics. He speaks on SMV-related issues all around New York State. Yates County has approximately 3,000 old order Mennonite community with its population operating horse and buggies. Farming, grape growing for wineries, and agricultural businesses is typically what they're involved with. So Sheriff Yates, he was kind enough to give us a presentation a few months ago, a month or two ago, and it was so very interesting that we invited him back. And Sheriff, with no further ado, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Joe. Good afternoon, everyone. Want to talk about issues with traffic incident management regarding slow-moving vehicles, or SMVs. And I know that getting back to zero crashes or collisions, I've tried to get away from the word accident and use crash and collision for the verbiage there. And one of the issues I want to refer to is an incident we had 10 years ago that happened in my county, a day I'll never forget. We had a mass casualty incident involving a farm tractor and two vehicles. We had 6 killed, 10 injured, and we made a criminal arrest out of it, et cetera. So I will refer back to that later as it's relevant in this presentation. I follow these SMV events across the states. And they're happening all over on a regular basis. And I've seen a lot of increase, seems this year in Wisconsin and Michigan, and obviously our state in New York and Pennsylvania for sure. But these headlines are frequently every week these headlines come out, and so I'm a little suspicious sometimes of the traffic. They still call them accident reports in different states as to whether these statistics are really correct or not, given some of the issues that we've seen. One of the issues that we frequently run into in trying to tell others about the awareness is the collision time, the closure time from a motor vehicle traveling 55 miles an hour approaching a tractor or a buggy, a horse and buggy type of thing, and it's only seconds. And so those kind of factors are what's causing these collisions, the higher speeds. We had 3 such incidents in our county in July, and one was a fatality, and all based upon the factor was distraction. And one of the issues we find with all our slow-moving vehicle incidents is that the operators of the SMV are unbelted. They don't wear safety belts, not designed that way. It's a different type of a vehicle. The roadway environments have something to do with it. There are a lot of trees and poles close to some of the roads. Some of the shoulders aren't very wide, and et cetera, that way.
And again, we're dealing with horse and buggies and farm-related equipment. Being a rural, I'm from western New York State. It's called the Finger Lakes region where I am. And it's a rural area, and so medical care after a crash can be an issue on response, and getting someone to a trauma center is another main issue. The other factor is, as you know, some of the Amish and some of the Mennonites, they don't like to put on the slow-moving vehicle emblem. We've had really excellent luck with our Old Order Mennonite folks putting this emblem on those black buggies, and so it makes a big difference. One of the things I think it's important here is that 9 out of 10 of these events, the operator of the buggy or the operator of the farm equipment is not at fault. It tends to always be the operator of a motor vehicle. And again, I said the crash data, statistical information, I think is very challenging. I'll talk about that a little later. What we're seeing is that these type of SMV events are occurring 90% in the daylight. Very few incidents at night. And on straight roads, there are 80% rear-end crashes where the motor vehicle strikes the rear of the buggy or the rear of the farm equipment. And again, following too close, we have a section in our vehicle and traffic law on not exercising due care when approaching a horse, and speed not reasonable and prudent or reckless driving can also be an issue. One of the things as far as Tim goes is that we have found that our 911 dispatch, a public safety answering point, training is so very important for traffic incident management, and so much centers around that, and yet, here they are, the first responder, as I call them, and it doesn't get the attention that I think it should get. We have found that if we have pre-planning protocols in place with our dispatch, knowing that we have a population of farm equipment moving on our highways and a lot of horse and buggies daily on our highways, that this leads to a lot of efficiency on our part, and so they're such an asset when it comes to traffic incident management. One of the we want to reduce the response time for emergency responders, first responders to get to these scenes. We also want to reduce the clearance times that these scenes can cause, and oftentimes the road is closed for a long period of time based upon everything that needs to be done and the scene the way it lays out itself. And so, and additionally, providing accurate information to the public is really important. And so, some of these protocols we have in place, we use something called Nixle that does community notifications. We put out notifications on road closures on our app, our agency app, through the social media. We use something, at times we have to use something called iPause, and we've used that. That stands for Integrated Public Alert and Warning System, where we can actually activate an announcement on all cellular telephones within the cell towers within our county that'll put it out to every phone. And then, of course, we use reverse 911 to make other notifications or evacuations, things like that. It all comes together knowing that our fire, our police, our EMS have got radio communications so that we have interoperability. And so that's one of the main things. Breaking down some of these incidences, we know that when we have a horse and buggy collision reported to us, that it's probably going to require EMS. It's probably going to require advanced life support, ALS. Some places call these fly cars. Sometimes it's a hospital vehicle. Sometimes it's operated by an ambulance corps. A lot of these ambulance corps in the rural area are volunteer, and but we have these protocols in place where if we have these incidents reported, then we know we're going to have a scene where somebody is probably going to be injured because, like I said, 90-some% of the time, if you're on a horse and buggy and you get clobbered by a car, you're going to get ejected. And we have people that fly through the air and end up in a roadway, end up on a shoulder, end up in a field, and so you've got serious injury most of these incidents. So being able to notify these folks is really important. Additionally, when it comes to EMS, being in a rural area, knowing that we have ejection type of incidents, we have serious injury, we also automatically will put our medevac, our regional medevac on standby until our first responders get there so that they can, the helicopter is ready to go. More often than not, the SMV type of a collision will require a medevac going to the scene for a transport. Now we've trained all our volunteer firefighters in our county the ability to set up a landing zone. These 100 by 100 foot areas need to be laid out. You can't always land in a highway. You have to be careful of the municipal utility wires and things like that. But the helicopters will want a landing zone set up. And so we can get those things pre-planned and get them assigned to our volunteers to get set up so when the helicopter arrives, it doesn't have to wait for that landing zone. Additionally, traffic control is a big issue, especially when it comes to clearance time for these types of incidences. Oftentimes the buggies will blow apart and there's debris scattered all over. And so the roads get closed down, and we have to set up detours and to move traffic around. Some of these incidents can take hours, quite frankly, and we're trying to reduce that time. The clearance time is important if we set these things up properly. Additionally, we have to be very concerned if there's hazardous materials involved. On the incident I first spoke about that happened 10 years ago, that was a farm tractor that had a spraying rig on it that had some herbicide on there which was leaking, and so you've got a hazmat situation. And so having those guidebook informations available and knowing what we have to do to make that scene safe. Any of these scenes, we certainly want to prevent a secondary incident from happening. We want to protect those scenes and not make it any worse than what it already is. Additionally, should there be a fatality or a death at the scene, sometimes that can take a while in a rural area for a coroner to respond to that scene. Not everyone in a rural area has access to a medical examiner. Sometimes the suburban areas or the city areas have the medical examiner, the ME, if you will. But most rural areas have a coroner. A lot of times they're an elected person that they're a lay coroner that don't have any experience this way, and coroner's physicians need to be required to actually co-sign a death certificate type of thing. Anyways, we have these people on call, and if we know there's a death at the scene, we get someone started to respond there before that body can leave the scene. We don't want to keep the thing shut down any longer than it has to, and so forth. Some of the volunteer ambulance corps will transport a dead body from the scene, and then a lot of them will not anymore. The trend is now call a funeral home to bring out one of their hearses or type of vehicles to do the transport. Once again, in trying to manage the incident, it's one more thing that holds the scene up. Getting back to the incident involving, especially with horse and buggies. As I said before, the buggy riders are always catapulted. There's usually someone injured seriously or killed. Dealing with a horse can be very challenging, especially if the horse is still alive and injured and moving around. Depending upon the injury, it can be kind of dangerous on how to approach them. And so we have veterinarians on call that we can send out to the scene. Often we have to have them do euthanasia at the scene. And then of course, here you've got a 1,000-pound animal laying there, either in the road or alongside the road, and having the right equipment or getting the right vehicle to the scene to do a removal is really important, and that too can be that can be another issue that is something that especially if you're going to try to open traffic back up, but yet you have a dead horse laying along the road, you've got to keep it covered up. It's very shocking to individuals to see such a thing. So these are other issues that are very concerning. Additionally, one of the things with law enforcement is that we want to do a collision reconstruction on these serious injury collisions, especially if someone may die or if we've got a fatality. And so we're looking, and some of these scenes have to be shut down just for collision reconstruction. We have found that we use a 360 camera to do a lot of our scene documentation. And by having that, you only have to set it up in a couple of places, and it takes you could take something that would normally take you on still pictures maybe 30, 40 minutes to document a scene. It'll do it in 5 minutes. It's very quick. We also, our unit uses a drone that can go above and take an aerial photo and a digital photo, which is very good at documenting the scene. We certainly use the total station to document our measurements and so forth, and then of course still photography as well. And one of the things that we have found have been a great investigative tool is being able to hook up to the black box, as we call it, on the motor vehicle itself, and for our crash reconstruction, and we can document the speed of the vehicle prior to the crash and some other good information when it comes to that type of an investigation. Trying to get that scene wrapped up as fast as we can. And again, we've got those folks on call, and dispatch can get those started right away. The other thing that always is prevalent with this type of a collision, especially with buggy or farm equipment, a normal wrecker with a hook, or as we like to say, send a hook, is not going to work. We have to be able to have a resource of roll top, flatbed type of wreckers to come out, and then sometimes you need additional equipment depending upon what the collision, and especially with farm equipment and so forth, to clean up the scene additionally. So a lot of times we'll impound a buggy. A lot of times we'll impound the vehicle, especially if we've got possibility of criminal charges that are involved. The next issue has to do with the actual police investigation itself. Obviously, there's a lot done at the scene. We operate a system called TRACS, and which is the documentation on they still call them a motor vehicle accident report. However, we're finding that the TRACS and some of the other systems out there do not adequately deal with the different operators within operating a buggy. We had a fatality recently where the passenger in a buggy was the person that was killed, and after a lot of frustration, we found that we had to document that on the report as a pedestrian. And certainly that's not the way it was, but that's the only way we could get the form to accept it. So we're trying to get the state to change that, and they've said they would. It's very challenging if we've got the right statistical information on true SMV collision types of incidents. The other thing, oftentimes with these types of events, especially with horse and buggy, you may have a criminal in charge involved. You may have the crime of reckless driving. You may have a vehicular homicide type of thing based upon whether the driver of the motor vehicle was intoxicated or under some kind of substance abuse. And of course, in New York State, we have done reform on discovery reform. We've been preached about discovery over and over and over again about all the legal information that the police develop. And even the WAV files that come out of 911 on the dispatch on the radio and the phone conversations and the reports, we have to turn all of that over to the district attorney, who has to give it to the defense. And so one of the challenges we've had is managing the digital evidence. There's digital evidence all over between the body cameras that a police officer wears, all the other pictures and everything taken at the scene, and all that stuff has to be documented and provided if you end up making a criminal charges. So discovery was very, very relevant to these issues. Coming back to that major incident we had 10 years ago, I just want you to take a look at these photos. The one in the upper left is kind of what they were faced with originally. Here you had we ended up with 6 people killed in that van and 10 people injured. It was basically a 15-passenger van. There was also a dog killed inside there, and so the scene was completely blocked off. We even were worried about the van tipping over. They hooked a chain on with a fire truck to hold it until a wrecker got there, and then it was really challenging. And I bring you back to the picture on the lower right. I took that picture actually at that scene. You had EMS in a triage situation in the foreground. Kind of in the middle is my investigators and deputy sheriffs discussing the investigation of the incident, and then in the far ground you have fire and EMS still making rescues out of that van that was collapsed and crushed under that farm tractor. We ended up when the first deputy arrived on that scene, the perpetrator that caused this whole event was an individual who was operating a motor vehicle under the influence of cocaine. And he passed on a double solid line, this farm tractor, and he crashed into the van, and then the van crashed into the SMV, and so the first deputy ended up in an arrest situation with the driver of the motor vehicle, who was really spaced out, and we ended up charging him with a vehicular manslaughter, homicide, later on, but that took that first officer right out of the whole other rest of the incident. And so we had to get other help there and whatever. But it was we learned an awful lot from this incident when it comes to these types of events. And which brings me to my last slide, which when you deal with this type of an issue, then we called it a mass casualty incident because of the number of people that were killed or injured. 911 was involved with all these notifications. Our dispatch was involved with putting out the notice to the media. The road was closed down for a good several hours. The police investigation, the police arrest, the evidence. We had fire and rescue ongoing, the traffic control, multiple tow trucks. We had a hazmat situation with the spray rig. We had a coroner situation. The local hospital morgue would only hold 2 patients or hold 2 victims. And so we had to have a temporary morgue set up. And we found out that because these were all Amish farmers in this van out looking for a farm to buy, none of those folks carry identification on them. And that turned out to be very challenging, trying to identify Amish folks that came from 2 counties away that had no identification on them between at the scene and at the hospital, et cetera, and that became very challenging. We also learned that when all the TV cameras showed up, that even though the scene was 300 yards away from where they got, those cameras, those television cameras, zoom right in. So we had to actually have a wall of first responders to try to protect the dignity of all the folks that were fatal. We learned a lot from that, and so with that, we learned a lot of protocols that go into place that are definitely part of the traffic incident management on reducing the time for the response and reducing clearance time and giving out accurate information to the public and traffic control is a real team effort. The word I like to use is synergy, that it takes from all the first responders involved, and you can have a good incident that way. As far as a management aspect of it, we've learned a lot from that. Joe, I'll give it back to you, and thank you.
Hey, Sheriff, great presentation. I mean, traffic incident management on steroids there, right? I mean, all the elements of emergency management and response. Thank you so much. Would you be so kind, if you would, if it's possible, pop your email address maybe in the chat pod, and if anyone wants to reach out for any additional info, they could do it that way. I'd be grateful, and thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to have Jamie next, Jamie Sullivan, the Director of National Center for Rural Road Safety. I gave her bio earlier. Jamie, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me this time?
Outstanding. I sure can. The floor is yours.
Okay. So thank you, everyone, for your patience. I really do appreciate that, and I apologize for all of the issues with my audio today. I do want to start with talking about the impact of rural safety. Martha talked about several of these statistics at the beginning, but in 2018, there were 16,411 rural roadway fatalities, which turns into 45 rural roadway fatalities per day, which equals, if we look at that, today during this workshop or webinar that we've been having, there were 3 rural roadway fatalities, and that's unacceptable. All of us are in this business for saving lives, and so we know that's unacceptable and that the only acceptable number is 0. And all of our other speakers so far have talked to us about the stories from those people, that they're our family and our friends and our coworkers, and so that really always hits me when I start thinking about it in these terms, in how many people it is just while I'm talking at a webinar or doing my daily work. So the most important thing is to save the people behind these numbers and behind these stories. And so how do we get to 0? We do this through a newer approach that's being used in the United States called the Safe System Approach. It's been used for years internationally, and it is different from the traditional approach that we've used, which used to focus on the movement of people and goods. And now we're starting to focus on safety as the primary purpose for our roadway system, knowing that death and serious injury is unacceptable. And we're starting to redesign some of our roadways because we know that humans make mistakes and that we need to have secondary countermeasures in place for when that does happen. And also that humans are vulnerable. You heard Sheriff Spike talk about what happens when you get ejected from a vehicle. So making sure there are things in place that can stop that from happening or stop us from running into obstacles that may provide too much kinetic energy on our bodies. And so there are 5 elements of a safe system. You can see those in the center of the circle on the right-hand side of our PowerPoint. But most important is that last one, the post-crash care, for today's discussion. And so each of these 5 elements, when we look at them, are created to do redundancy so that we have multiple options for saving someone's life. And death and serious injury only happen when all 5 of those layers fail. But the post-crash care piece is where rural traffic incident management comes in. And so today we're going to talk about that a little bit more. We've gone through a lot of great case studies with both Megan and Sheriff Spike, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about our state of the practice that we put together that Martha mentioned earlier. And so what we realized in the state of the practice is that rural characteristics, those things that we really love about rural, tend to also then provide some challenges. So we love the fact that there's rolling terrain in rural areas, that there's not as many people, that it's very quiet and that we can disconnect. But at the same time, those cause challenges when we're trying to do jobs such as traffic incident management. And this affects detection time for those crashes once they occur based on low traffic volumes, gaps in communication and those long distances for detecting these. Notification, we've heard some stories about cellular coverage lacking and needing to drive far distances just to be able to get to a landline or to retain cellular service again in order to notify that a crash has occurred. And then arrival time for first responders with those large geographic coverage areas that Martha mentioned earlier. And rural TIM is absolutely done by a lot of volunteer responders. They are essential to what happens in rural TIM, but at the same time, our volunteer responders have primary jobs that they're working as well. And so it may take a little bit longer for them to get there once they have to leave their primary jobs and go get the proper equipment and arrive at a scene. And then also those limited resources that you heard both of our speakers talk about as well. And so some examples that we found in the state of the practice for overcoming some of these, specifically for the detection and notification challenges, were things such as systems that could help with location detection, such as E911. Next Generation 911 is able to allow text to go through sometimes when cellular service will not, so this provides an additional layer of communications. Wyoming DOT has a Where I'm At feature on their Wyoming 511 system, which has been fantastic to help provide GPS locations if someone is unfamiliar with the area in which they're in. Carbine 911 is being used by Georgia, and this is a way to ping phones to get accuracy for locations, again, so that they can figure out where the crash is and confirm that very easily. Crowdsourcing through either 511 systems in a state or Waze's Connected Citizen program is great when there is communication there available to do so. And then service safety patrols such as Georgia DOT's. We heard Paul mention the pooled fund that's happening for those. There are several rural service safety patrols, so making sure that you look into those and see what the benefits are. Some examples for overcoming communication challenges would be some of these as shown on the screen. Some of these are augmented radio systems. Some are systems that allow multiple agencies to talk together over different radio frequencies. WyoLink is a way to use low bandwidth with restricted access for only government agencies and emergency responders. The cow trailers are ones that are self-contained for larger emergencies. And so some of these other ones as well are being used in rural areas for communications challenges. We also heard about some unique circumstances such as unpaved roads, making sure you're thinking through and pre-planning for things such as rain and large responder vehicles getting stuck, advanced warning with line of sight challenges, weight restrictions, and even infrastructure not necessarily being built to the same specifications as paved roads. And then we spoke about these horse and buggy incidents and livestock crashes in more detail with our case studies earlier. So the key takeaways, just to wrap up what you heard today, because I know we are running out of time, is that pre-planning is key to overcoming rural challenges. This includes the various incidents that we heard about today, things such as alternative routes for very long detours, weight restrictions that may be in place, plans for medevac, as Sheriff Sykes talked about. Training and tabletop scenario exercises are also important to be adapted to your local scenarios, so you're preparing your responders for what may happen in your region. And Megan gave us a great example of that, and training for livestock. And Sheriff Spike talked about training for 911 dispatchers being very important as well. And then relationship building pre-event is absolutely necessary. Many urban areas have TIM teams, and we're seeing those start in rural areas as well. They meet on a regular basis to discuss these pre-planning and training events and do multi-jurisdictional trainings. Making sure you're cooperating with your federal land management agencies in the area, so National Parks and Forest Service, who may also need TIM in their areas. Fire police units exist in many places in the United States and are able to offer traffic management, so making sure if those are in your area that you've built a relationship. And then again, Megan spoke about partnered allied agency contact information, and she showed an incident assessment sheet that is so important in making sure you know who to call in the middle of the night for some of these more specialized contacts like vets and holding spaces for animals. And so I'm going to wrap up here because I know we're at time. If you'd like to learn more about rural issues, there is a National Center for Rural Road Safety, which is a center of excellence funded by Federal Highway Administration, very similar to the National Operations Center of Excellence, and we would love to have you participate in our webinars and summits as well if you're looking for more information on rural.
Outstanding, Jamie. Thank you so much. Thanks for thanks for your diligence and getting back in and getting on for us. Ladies and gentlemen, I tell you, whether you're inner city or out there in the rural area, you can't walk away from these presentations without taking something with you, right? We all learned something out of this and the challenges that we can apply to our area. So with all that said, I want to thank the Sheriff Spikes, Megan, Jamie, Martha, Paul for your hospitality. Jim had to drop off. I like to leave you with a thought, and that is traffic incident management. We typically tie it to crashes, but it's not just for crashes anymore, right? Remember, every emergency incident will affect traffic in some way, shape, or form. So appreciate all of your help. Thankful for all your help and all that you do. At this point, I think I'll turn it back to Paul, I believe. And with all that said, Paul, you have the floor.
Well, I'm here, Joe, and I think you close us out really well. Thanks everyone for attending and for participating. And just so you know, we are going to be pursuing more and more about rural for many of the reasons you heard today. And there's more information. We could have had the next 4 months on rural Tim on Talking Tim webinars. So we'll be sharing more information as we move forward. And we really appreciate everyone's participation. And for those of you that might be new for this Talking Tim, please join us. Continue to join us. We always touch on something that's rural. But anyways, everyone be safe out there, and thanks for all you do. Appreciate your participation today. With that, we'll end it. Thank you.